Okay, so back to here. Now we are able to access the information. So we can see, so this is the constructor is calling, and after that, carefully observe here how exactly this keyword is working here. Basically, from this particular line where it will go, and this is the line is executed, and after that is trying to execute this particular line because internally what we are doing here, we are calling so one more constructor using the single parameter. So that's the reason it will back to the line number 20. And after that, you can see where is our console. You can observe here this constructor is calling. So ignore these are the three information coming from the previous example here. But make sure first constructor this message printing. Which constructor? This is the single parameters constructor, and after that you can see. So this is the second constructor is calling, and make sure so one more constructor. So carefully observe here where we are the initially. Now we are back to the same step here. Now we are back to this particular same step here. So now finally the particular constructor, the three parameter constructor is calling. And what I want to explain here, so we are having two objects, and this also same thing is going to execute here. Basically, what I want to explain here, whenever we are using this keyword, what it will do is going to check any constructor having two parameters. So if we are having already this particular constructor, so it's trying to execute line number 24. So internally, what we are doing here, we are calling one more constructor. So this is the single parameterized constructor. Getting the point. So first this will initialize the property. Later, so I want to make one some sequence number. Second here, this particular sysout is going to execute. Later, where it will back, and it will back to here because this particular constructor is called from this line 24. So the 24 is executed. So this the particular sysout is going to execute the line as a third step here. And now after that we are what we are doing here, we are initializing the value. Later, so it's going to check this particular constructor is called from where. This particular constructor is called from where. So this is called from this particular line number 14. So after this is the fourth step is going to execute, and the fifth step what we are doing is we are trying to initialize the width value here. So this is the internal style of executing when we are using this keyword. So this is very important here, how exactly the constructors are calling internally. The constructors are calling internally. So make sure, so we need to know the understanding flow execution. Right. So we'll go back to the one more information here. Directly we'll check. So as of now, we identified the primitive data types as a parameter. Now I'm going to create one more constructor here. One more constructor, so which is going to take as a object as a parameter. Getting the point? Object as a parameter. So this is a one more constructor is taking object as a parameter. What I am doing here, simply, so width is equals to obj dot width. Obj dot width. Right. And height is equals to obj dot height. Same way, depth is equals to obj dot depth. So this is the way we can initialize the values. Make sure what we are doing here. So whenever we are calling this particular constructor, we are passing in a one more object as a reference here. Getting the point. So how we can work on this particular example here. We'll go back to this particular box demo, and so instead of creating this particular box 3, now what we can do here. So simply we'll create one more object here. We'll specify the information here. new box. Here we can specify the box reference. Getting the point. So observe, this is initially we are creating one object, and the second object we are creating, and here what we are doing here. So this is the first class object reference we are passing into the constructor of this particular box constructor as a object as a parameter, and we are returning into the box 3. Getting the point. So now if I'm going to run the same example, the same output we are going to see here, the same output we are able to see, but only the difference here initially, so directly we are passing the reference. Getting the point. Directly we are passing this particular reference to one more object. But now what I am doing is, while creating an object, I'm specifying one more reference here. Getting the point. So this is the way also we can specify the object as a parameter here. Right, now we check with the one more example. So using this, let me create a one more class here, something called object ref. I want to make one object ref here, so we'll later call the method. Now, so this is the object ref we are having, and I want to create this particular object ref here. Is going to take something called int I comma into j, and I comma j I am declaring, and later what I am doing is something called this dot I is equals to I, this dot j is equals to j. So this is the way I am trying to make the local variable to instance variable, and later what I am doing is I am calling one method here that is called equals. So this is the equals method is expecting so box boolean equals, and now here I need to specify the object as a reference here. Make sure here what I am doing here, something called I'm passing object reference. So initially we are working with the constructor, now we are working with this particular method here. Carefully observe what I want to do, something called object dot I, and equals to I, and object dot j equals to j. So if this condition is matched, now what I am returning, simply true. So observe carefully what we are doing here. We are creating one constructor with the two parameters, right? And after we are calling this particular equals method. So now what we are doing internally, we are checking the values here, I values, and as well as this particular instance values. If it is matched here, now what we are doing here, we are returning true. Otherwise, we are returning false here. Okay. Now what we can do, we'll go back to the main method. What we can do, we need to create this particular object here, something called ref, and I want to check here comma 20. One object I am creating here. So one more object we need to create here, because why we need to create another object. So basically, we need, whenever we are calling this particular equals method, what we are doing here, we need an object as a parameter here. So now I want to make something called 3040, and I need to change ref1 here, right? So can you please, I'm requesting one more time. So most of the people are unmuted. I don't know who is the viewer 16 here. So make sure now what I'm doing here. First we'll create, we'll call the equals method here, ref dot equals. So this particular equals is expecting, so this is coming from the object class. So you ignore this. We need to check with this particular equals method object reference here. Now what I'm doing here, I'm going to call object1. So simply I want to make sysout here. I want to make sysout here. So we'll check here what is an output we are going to get. Make sure here, so we are getting false here. So why we are getting the false? Because why we are getting this particular reference here? Now what we are doing internally, we are passing the object reference and we are checking this particular condition. So this condition is not satisfied, simply we are returning false. So I will check with the correct value 10, 9, 20. Okay, observe here. We are getting true. Getting the point. So this is the way we can specify object as a reference to this particular method. Not only this method, we can create any method, we can pass here. So we identified in the last class, we are we are passing object as a parameter to constructor. In this example, we are specifying object as a parameter to method. Getting the point. So someone is trying to ask the question, like what if I change the value of box 3 value, will it affected to object since both are the pointing the same reference? Exactly. So we'll see this example, whatever you're trying to ask the question related to some reference here, because I'm going to cover one more example. So in a few minutes, so we'll check how exactly it's working here. Right. Now I will come back to your question. Now, so we'll see the object parameter we identified here. So basically, so Java, some of the people, they are having a little bit confusion. So whether it is a call by value or either it is a call by reference, they are into the bit confusion here. So those kind of confusion I'm going to clarify here. Observe here. So basically what I want to explain here, I want to create a one more class here. So something called call by value, and now what I am doing, this particular call by value.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Could you go to object reference class?
Yes, tell me. One second. Okay.
And can you please now explain what happens in the logic, like what gets compared with what? So suppose if I am calling first line of the void main, right? Object reference 10, 20 passes the first method. Then I gets the value 10, J gets the value. And then what happens in the second method, like Boolean equals method? What gets compared with what?
Okay. Okay. So carefully observe. I'm making in the debug mode to understand more. Okay. Now, so you need to check inside this particular variable section. This is an object here, right? Now, inside this particular object, what are the I and j value we are getting?
30 and 20.
30 and 20. Now we'll go back to this. So this keyword we already explained is going to point to the current class object. And whatever this particular obj, this is this obj, this. Getting the point?
Okay.
Okay. Now we'll check inside this keyword. What are the I and j value?
10 and 20.
So it's going to match or not?
No.
So basically, observe carefully. The reference here, it is important. Back to here. Now this particular obj dot I, right, is pointing to this particular I, because you can see the reference here, it is having obj.
Okay.
And this particular I is coming from the this particular I and j. So this comes under this keyword.
Okay.
So if you compare the both value, you will get answer here. If you are comparing this information, whether these are equal, we'll get the true. If not equal, we are going to get the false.
But I have one question. Like when the second object, like the ref1 line gets executed, right? Again, it will call the first method object ref. Then won't that I, j, that is value 10, 20 will get override by 30 and 20?
Okay. So basically, still you did not understand. I am creating two objects here,
Yes.
right? So I'm calling the object reference is nothing but first class object reference. I'm calling the method called equals, and I'm passing reference one. So this is the another object.
Okay.
Right. So that's the reason these objects are not satisfied. It's returning false. So we'll go back to the one more time, and I'm changing it. Getting the point?
Yeah.
So I'm changing.
Yeah.
So these are the equals here.
The reference is passed with what you are comparing is different.
Yes. Object reference it is different and passing the value is different. So that's the reason I am explaining more times here. So that's the reason I created ref and ref1 here.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Back to here, the current example, call by value. So what we need to discuss here, basically, I want to create one object here. Otherwise, can we work on the same? I think we can work on this object reference here. So simply inside this constructor, I want to create a one more method here, something called here. What I want to do inside this particular okay, I comma the same param information I want to take the int I comma j, and here what I will do, this dot I value. So here, this is I want to add one logic here. Basically, carefully observe here. We are passing using this particular constructor, and after that I am going to call one function here. This is nothing but a method I am calling here method. Right. Now what we are going to do. So whether this particular call by value, how it's going to work, we are going to identify here. I'm creating one object reference here. So something called 15 and 20. After calling this, what I'm doing here, I'm going to call method here. I'm going to call. So basically, so 0 we are going to get, right? The same value I want to call here. 59 to 20. Whenever this particular method is called, now we'll see after this particular example. Okay, 1 second. I don't want to make this constructor because we are going to get multiple values here. Okay. So object is created and the method we are calling. Okay. So before calling, we need to check here. Int a is equals to 15 into b is equals to 20. And I'm trying to add once it's out here a and b values before calling. Okay, and after that what I'm doing here, I want to call a and b, and I want to check here after calling. Right, here we need to specify a value as well b. So here also I want to specify same. So a and b. Right, now observe carefully. If I'm going to run the same example here, so we are getting before and after the same values here. Before and after we are getting same. But if we observe carefully, so here what we are doing here, we are trying to do some multiplications as well as something division operation here. Getting the point. But here those values are not reflected after calling this particular method. Getting the point. Because here we are going to get some output here. Some values we are trying to multiply and some value we are trying to divide. Getting the point. So those information we are not getting here. Whatever the value we are having initially, those information only we are able to see. Getting the point. So what I want to explain here, whenever we are working with the call by value, so it's going to check with the particular primitive data type. So based on the primitive value is going to work on the changes will not going to reflect to the primitive values. So same simple example here, because we already specified the a value 15 and b value 20, but the reflected value we are not going to get to this particular variables here, because so this is the section is different, the calling section is different here. So as I explained here, whenever we are going to work with this particular instance level variable, so the instance variable is not related to this particular local variable. So because of this, so whatever the changes we made in the instance level, these values will not going to reflect it to the this particular local variable. Getting the point? So this is the call by value, and now we'll go back to the call by reference here, and I want to create one more object here. So let me change this as a call by ref. Sorry. We'll go back to the refactor and rename. Okay, this is the call by ref here, and into a comma b, and after that public, I want to create constructor here with the 2 parameters. And A is equals to I, B is equals to J. And the same method I want to use something called math. And what I'm doing here, instead of passing the parameter, I'm going to pass object here, something called call by ref. Here, what I'm doing here, obj dot A is equals to, I want to multiply sum with value, and obj dot B, I want to work with the division operator here, something called 4. Right. So whenever we are using this particular information, what I am doing here, I will create a main method. Inside the main method, I am going to call, I will first create an object here, something called ref here, and here the same values I want to specify, something called 15, 20. So this constructor is going to call and it will initialize the values. And after that, what I am doing here, ref dot, and here we need to pass ob, something called ref. Let me copy this information here. Here what here we cannot find here, ref dot k, and one more ref dot b. And after calling this method, again I want to print. So carefully observe here. You can see initially it is 15, 20, and after calling we are getting 30 and 5. Getting the point. So what you understand here, whenever we are working with the call by reference here, so basically the reference is going to communicate with the heap memory. Getting the point. So because of this particular heap memory, whatever the object is changed here, whatever this particular object related information is changed here, so wherever we are trying to work with the same reference, wherever you are working with the same reference, the changes information we are going to find. Getting the point. So initially, before calling the method, so same reference we are accessing, and after calling the method with the same reference we are accessing here. So now carefully observe with some diagrammatic so that we'll get an understand here. And so this is one object heap memory here, and this is the I and j value, something called a and b. The initially a value we are passing as a 15 using this particular constructor. The b value we are passing something called 20. So this information is going to stored in the heap memory with a reference of, what is the reference here? Something called REF. Right, this REF coming from this. Getting the point. And what we are doing here, before calling ref.a. So this particular ref here, and now it is pointing to this particular a value. Same way ref.b. Whenever we are calling this particular constructor, this object will create in the heap memory, and whenever we are calling this particular line of statement here, we are getting 15 and 20. Right, and after that, what happening here? Whenever we are calling this particular method here, so we are trying to do some multiplication. Whatever the multiplication is happened here, this particular value is override with the new value here. Getting the point. And so this is also same. We are getting something called 5 here. And if you carefully observe, this information is changed in the heap memory. Right. This information is changed in the heap memory now, but we are having the same reference here. So with the same reference, how many times we are going to access? So whatever the changes information is available in the heap memory, so those information we are going to get. So this is by we are going to call as a call by reference. The call by reference is going to work for the object references. The call by value is going to work for the primitive data types. So that is called int or double or character or boolean. Getting the point. So someone asked the question regarding the reference here. So this is, you need to understand, whenever we are pointing the particular two objects here. So if we are trying to change, the object is going to change in the heap memory location. So it's going to reflect it in the both objects. So that is we already covered in the previous example. So something called, we have only one object, but having two references here. Getting the point. So that is happens when we are working with the constructor object 3. Any questions regarding this call by value and call by reference? Right. So we'll go back to the one more example here, something called, so recursion related example we will find here. Basically, so the advantage, what advantage we are going to get here, whenever we are trying to work with this particular recursion, so it's something called, it's going to call itself. So it's going to call internally to work on the operations here. So how exactly it's going to call, we'll see something called, some factorial related example we'll focus here. And we'll work on this, some factorial example. Inside this particular factorial, now what I want to do, I want to create a one method, something called fact here. And here I want to specify int n. Here I want to specify int n here. Right, because this particular method is expecting one return, the integer value, we need to return the value here. So carefully observe here. Now what I am doing here, internally I want to create one more variable called result. Getting the point. And I want to make one condition, if n equals to 1. So simply I want to return 1. Getting the point. And so if the particular condition is not satisfied, I want to check here result equals to, what I am doing here, I am calling the method and by passing n minus 1. And here I'm trying to, because we need to find out the factorial of the given number here. So here we need to work on the multiplication. Getting the point. So once it is returning, still it is expecting the return type here. What we can do? Return result. Return result. So carefully observe here, we created the one method that is called fact, and we created one variable called result. what we are doing here, we are checking whether this particular int n value, whenever we are giving this particular n value as a 1, simply we are returning 1. And if this particular condition is not satisfied, what we are doing here, again we are calling the method. Again, we are calling the method by specifying this particular value, n minus 1. Getting the point. And later, we are returning this particular result here. So this is the simple logic we are going to work here. And later, I want to create a main method here. So what I can do, we'll create an object of this particular factorial. Okay, so something called FA. I'm going to use the eigenfact. We may get some confusion here. No, this is the default constructor we are calling, and I want to call the method called fact, and we need to specify integer value. So initially I want to specify 3. Let me make the sysout here. So factorial of 3 is, first we'll check this particular 3. So what exactly you are expecting here? What is the factorial of 3 we are going to find here? So is it correct or wrong? Can you please explain me? The factorial of 3, we are going to get 6. So you are not finding. Okay. So carefully observe here. I want to explain this example little bit in the debug mode. So basically how exactly this method is working internally, we need to identify here. So each and every example, most of that I'm trying to provide the line by line execution here. So carefully observe the n value. What is n value we are passing? Something called 3. This condition is failing here. Now what we are doing here, what is n value? What is n value we are having? 3. Now what we are doing here, we are making -1. Right. So something called 2. If I'm going to call the same method, carefully observe here, the n value now it is 3. Right. So see, again the method is calling. But after that, what we are doing, whatever we are getting this particular n minus 1, if you are observing the result, so now it is n equals to 1. But basically the fact method is called 2 times. After calling this particular fact method, now is going to perform some multiplication operation now. So see, the fact method is returning 1, but n value is still 2. Why it is still 2? If you observe, again the n value is going to change. So now the result we are getting 2 here. But if I am going to return the result, we are getting 3, 6. Getting the point. So see, we'll see one more time here. Some of the people we may not understand how exactly it's printing. So basically what I want to explain, initially whatever the value we are having this, based on this is going to call the fact method. After calling, whenever this particular n value is equal to 1, once this condition is satisfied, what it will do, it will back to here the fact method, because we are pending this particular multiplication logic here. We are pending the multiplication logic here, so it's going to multiply the value. So carefully observe here. Now the method is calling, n value is reduced. Again the method is calling, n values become 1. But if you observe here, Again, even though the n value is 1, it is not returning the first particular into value, something called the return value 1 here. But what is doing here? Again, it is calling this particular fact, because what we are getting here, whatever the value we are having, and with the value we are trying to multiply here. So that is the value we are getting 2. Right. So because of this, what happens here internally? So again is going to check here. The result we are getting 2. The result is not going to return. Now the result is become 3. Why it is become 3? Because it is pended with the previous value. Now is going to multiply with the value. So now we are going to get 6 here. So this is the way the method, the fact method, it's calling internally, and it is returning something, the expected result here. How many times this method is called, the same time this particular multiplication operation is going to perform here. So that is we need to understand carefully. So finally it's returning this particular fact 3. Okay, so this is the way also we can work with the calling the method itself internally. And we'll go back to the one more example here. So basically in the previous example we implemented something called stack related example here. Getting the point. So whenever I'm trying to implement this particular stack example, I explain one OOPS related principle, something called encapsulation here. So what we are doing here, basically whatever the data we are getting from the something called the main method, we are linking with this particular properties. Getting the point. Using this particular methods, what we are doing here, we are trying to insert the information into this particular array, something called arrays. The integer array we are inserting. So this is nothing but we are going to have the communication between data with the code here. Getting the point. And along with that, we are going to have one more feature, something called accessing the particular variable information. So the concept we are going to discuss here, access control here. And in Java, we are having around 4 access modifiers. What are the 4 access modifiers we are having here? So if you observe something called public, private, protected, and default. Getting the point. So these are the access modifiers are available in the Java. Using this particular access modifier, if I'm going to work with the same example, so we are going to have one more level of the controlling this particular objects. Getting the point. So we'll see the same example how we can control. But back to here, what I want to explain here, using this particular access modifier, how we can perform the example here. So basically, this is the by default we are using the public here. Now the public is going to access anywhere outside of this particular class. In a few days we are going to discuss with the packages. We can work on the outside of the packages also. And coming back to this particular private is going to applicable within the same class. Within the same class, we cannot access the outside of the particular class, so we may get some error here. And this protected we'll see in the later classes, and we'll see the default how exactly it's going to work. So in the current example, we'll check with the private and default here. Okay, now we'll create one example here. So with this particular access modifier, how we can work on the simple example here, something called access control. Now what I am doing here, int a, right, and public into b, private into c. So we are having 3 variables here, and each variable having different access modifier. So if you are not defining anything, the particular access modifier, it will come under the default. So as I explained, the protected we are going to see in the upcoming classes. So we are having the method called setC. And what I'm doing here, I want to specify one parameter. And the parameter, what I'm doing is something called C is equals to I. Whatever the I value we are getting, I'm assigning into this particular C. And later, I'm calling the getC method, simply will return C here. Getting the point. So getC also I'm calling. And after that, what I will do, I will create a main method. I will create a main method here. Now, I'm calling access control, something called CON new control. Right. So here we need to initialize the values first. We need to initialize the values first. So basically something called con dot I want to initialize is equals to 10, con dot b is equals to 20, con dot c is equals to 15. Right. So here we don't have any objection. We're not getting any error here. Getting the point. So if I'm going to call something called con dot set c with to specify the value called 100, and I want to call the get c. Right. If I'm going to run the example, the 100 value we are getting. So how is the 100 value getting? Because the 100 value we are setting in the setter method called setC. Right. And if I'm calling the get method, we are getting the particular C value. So carefully observe the same example I want to call from one more class. So something called box demo. And just I want to make little bit comment of this particular line. And here I created object. So if you observe here, the line number 36, we are getting error. The same example, if you are running from the same class, we don't have any objections here. But if I'm creating an object from the outside of the class, so we are having error here. So what error we are having here? So we'll see access control dot C is not feasible. Why it is not feasible? So I explained here the private access modifiers can only access within the same class. So we cannot access the outside of the class. Getting the point. So we'll try to focus the remaining concept layer, the public and protected, how exactly it's going to work. And we'll try to create a one more example to work on this particular access modifier. Getting the point. So we'll continue this example tomorrow, and tomorrow also we are going to have a class. So please continue join the tomorrow. We'll try to continue these concepts. Any questions regarding this particular today class, except this particular access modifier? So still we need to discuss more. Okay. If you don't have any queries, I'm going to conclude the meeting and we'll continue tomorrow at same time. Even? పట్టుమని కొడుతున్నాయా Which answer?